14th, 2011. This meeting of Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board is called to order. I will note that all members are present. I will ask for unanimous consent to adopt the agenda, having first noted that item 8.1 will not occur tonight. It will return at a later date. Hearing no objection, we'll move on to approving the minutes from the April 12th, 2011 meeting. Sandra, will you perform a roll call vote on this item once there's a motion to approve? Mr. Gates, I will respectfully suggest you abstain from this item as you were not present. Any corrections to the minutes before us?
No.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Member Durham?
Here.
Member Winterberg?
Here.
This is
Yes.
to approve.
Yay.
Vice Chair England?
Here.
Chair James?
Yes.
3 yeses and a here.
That's okay. Is anyone here tonight who'd like to talk to us about something not on the agenda? Seeing no response, we will skip over the vacant consent agenda and public hearing and proceed directly to a presentation and discussion of Vineyard Oaks. We will merely be forwarding our comments to council, correct?
Yes.
Go ahead, Sandra.
So tonight you have before you exterior design modifications for the Vineyard Oaks project, and it's due to new exterior design that the applicant would like to pursue after receiving some feedback from potential buyers. The site layout as shown in this slide will remain the same, and it shows the same combination of one and two-story houses that was earlier approved. The one change to the site plan is the relocation of the house on Lot 9, 3 feet closer to the front property line, and that's within the front setback. The change in the designs is mainly a simplification of the designs. The decorative wood trim and other details have been stripped away. Openings are more simplified, and this is an example of the proposal at this stage. Each one of the different plans represents a material and color scheme, and this will be available to any of the buyers for the residences. And there won't be two of the same material color schemes adjacent to one another or more than two of one plan. But this will show you an example of the different plans. This is Plan A, Plan B, D, E, and F. And it shows that's basically what is before you tonight for your consideration and comment so that we can forward on to council these design change recommendations. And the applicant is here to give a presentation as well.
Before we hear from the applicant, any questions of staff at this juncture? Bob, Eric, would you like to talk?
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And you can hear me? I'm coming through clear. Good. Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity for us to come back to the Zoning Design Review Board to show you the elevation changes that we proposed. First, I want to introduce the people that are here. They can also answer some questions if I'm not able to answer your questions. Bob Massaro is here from Healthy Buildings, principal from Healthy Buildings. Rebecca Conrad is an architect in Healthy Buildings office, and Alexa Jackson is an interior designer with Healthy Buildings, and my wife Peggy is here this evening. And I think my daughters are listening or watching online, so I'll say hello to them. Thanks very much again for hearing us. Well, I have to say, first of all, we would not be back here going through this process if we didn't think at 110% that we were improving the project, not only just for the overall look of the project, but for the neighborhood and for neighborhood as well. So first of all, I want to also say that I did send information today. I think our neighbors in Stagsby Lane probably received a notice today or on Friday or Saturday for the public hearing for the council meeting on the 21st. But I did send him our rendering proposal, and the cover letter and my response and the staff report and my response to the staff report. So I did get that information out to them and made it clear to them they always have an opportunity to call me and to also speak to the council when we're before the town council. So generally looking at the whole site, we have made no changes to the project that affects view corridors for any of the neighbors. As Sandra said, the only change was to move on Lot 9 that house forward 3 feet, but there are not any building site changes that change view corridors for the neighbors. The biggest change, what we're showing to you here, is that our original proposal or approved master plan development project 2 years ago, the houses had an arts and crafts, a craftsman look, and almost a Victorian look on some of the designs because of the corbels and the features in the house. What we're presenting now to you and to the council is a more refined look, bringing more of a prairie-style look to the design. We believe that the prairie design really simplifies the overall look, but more importantly, it blends the project into the neighborhood, into the vineyard setting, and is a cleaner look. It's certainly has come about from some comments that we've had from people looking at the project, and I think overall it's an improvement overall for the neighborhood. And when you look at I guess there's a few details I want to go over, and then I'll be happy to answer your questions. The few changes that you will see from the old plan that was approved 2 years ago is on all the plans we removed the chimneys from the plan from every home. We also are providing an alternative. We'd like to provide an alternative for buyers that either the roofing material will be standing seam or will be a very high dimensional composition type roof, but there will be that choice. I think that certainly provides an opportunity to provide an alternative, so that there's both those options. Also, in general, some of the designs you'll see we've replaced some gable end designs with hip roofs. I think in the long term, as you look down the project, that the hip roof changes, particularly on the two-story designs, helps improve view corridors. It's just a look that I think improves the project, and as I've said now a few times, I think makes it more in line with the neighborhood's designs. Let's see. I think I've covered the issue. I think there's only a few things. I gave to you a response to the staff report, and there's just a couple things I'd like to reiterate on that. And Sandra talked about the stucco application now on this project, and I just wanted to let you know I looked over the 2009 Master Development Plan, and on that plan there were 8 of the 13 homes had stucco. Our current home designs show stucco on 10 of the 13 homes, with the 2 stories on lots 8, 10, and 12 having a blending of stucco and paneling. Let's see, and then what else was I going to add? I also included with you some just photos on the next page of some recent approved homes in town that show stucco and standing seam roofs, and a blend of stone and stucco, which I think illustrates that our project continues to stay very consistent with the zoning design guidelines. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Eric?
I have one question just about the, what are you calling it, the now basement kind of patios? What are you calling those?
Sunken Gardens.
Sunken gardens. Is there going to be multiple options for how those are finished? Are they going to be stone? Are they going to be a permeable material? Are they going to be grass? The sunken gardens, yeah.
Well, the sunken garden is actually a feature for our project that we're basically calling as a part of the tasting room and entertainment room that is a subterranean design. And from working on the project so far and the rain we've received, it's obviously the answer for anyone that's interested in that and adding that to the home design. It's yes, but there's obviously a little more challenges doing it on the south side of the project, near the trees, versus on the north end. And it's not the trees, that those homes are away from the homes, but just the ground is drier on the north end of the project. So the sunken garden is really a design feature for egress from that space. So there's egress into the living space, and then there's code requirement egress to the back. And what we designed was we pushed it out a little bit farther. So from the entertainment room, tasting room that's below grade, you'll have light, and that relief will allow more light into that space. It might allow for a garden area there, and then the stairs out that would then exit out into the backyard. So it's more, it functions twice as an appealing addition, but primarily egress too for that space.
So I guess that almost brings up two questions. So it's an optional feature. It might not actually be
It's an
the
optional
floor plan
feature
and all
for
these.
buyers,
Okay.
correct.
And then the second thing is, what is the material going to be at the bottom, the floor of that garden? Because I remember you guys have some drainage going on. There's some wet soil there, isn't there?
Let me have, if it's okay,
Okay.
I'll have Bob answer that question for you. So thank you.
Sure.
The sunken gardens are, the subterranean spaces are designed to be waterproofed. It's waterproof construction. There will be drains and pumps to pump out water from the garden area and water that surrounds the perimeter. I've built several subterranean structures, some of which were 15 feet into the water table. So there's technology associated with how to do it. The sunken gardens are really designed, as Eric says, to be a method of egress. But more importantly, because of the floor area ratios, we wanted to keep those tight. People are asking for wine cellars and asking for entertainment rooms, but we wanted to stay within the FARs, and we are. We're in the 36% range. So it's an option. It'll be waterproofed, and there will be pumps available to pump out any storm drainage or anything like that.
So what's the material going to be? Is it going to be, because on some of the floor plans, I can see that it looks like it's some sort of tile or concrete or...
Oh, I'm sorry, but you're talking about the floor itself?
The
of
floor
sunken garden?
itself,
It'll be paver tiles with pervious pavement. So in other words, it's a stone material with grass or some vegetative material that'll drain to a central drain, that'll go to a sump and then be pumped out, in this case, to the swale in the back.
Bob, I want to follow up on Mr. Winterberg's question. The sunken gardens, which become a means of egress from the basement, are optional,
Correct.
correct? So if a buyer does not elect a sunken garden, the only means of egress is through the dwelling itself, correct?
Well, there would be no, the sunken garden is attached to a subterranean space. If they're going to have a subterranean space, they have to have a sunken garden. So if they elect not to have a subterranean space, there's no sunken garden.
I understand. Because if there's a subterranean space, you have to have an independent
Exactly.
means of egress. That's
Right.
where my confusion arose.
Yeah, there's an exterior one through the sunken garden and an interior one through the house.
Right, but you have to have an exterior, so it's really the choice is having the subterranean space, and then that comes with the sunken garden.
Correct.
Okay. Bob, will you walk me through, let's just take Plan D, for example. While that's a proposed color scheme for Plan D, that's not necessarily the color scheme that would apply to Plan D. I could, were I a buyer, for example, say I want color scheme A on this dwelling. That's how I understand the staff report, that I can, with the five
We wanna-
different palettes,
Yeah.
the buyer can elect to put them on essentially any house. Now, clearly, you might not pick the hardy panel siding color where there is no such siding. But I
The
want
idea-
a little clarity there, because I think it's somewhat disingenuous, if I'm understanding it correctly, to suggest that's the only color scheme that will appear on Plan D.
The buyer can request various color schemes. It's our job, and the developer's job, to provide a palette on that street that's pleasant, a lot of variation, and so on. So the fact that a buyer requests a color scheme doesn't necessarily mean we're going to put in that color scheme. The color schemes that we presented here are the ones that we feel work best for the streetscape and for the models and so on.
So
So-
what color schemes are you asking us to approve on each particular lot? That's what I'm driving at. I understand you may direct a buyer away from a
I think
particular
we
color.
should, I think we look at the two things. We're not asking for approval of every single, all 12 lots, color schemes at this point. What we've presented is 5 different schemes that we want to be able to vary so that we've got a streetscape that's interesting and there's no repetitiveness. In other words, we're not going to make 2 identical houses. So what we're asking you to do is essentially what we asked you to do the first time, which was approve a palette that we would then apply to the particular models at the developer's prerogative, with the understanding that we're going to try to keep the color schemes as consistent with the neighborhood and as interesting as possible.
I
I think
understand.
it's the material palettes. For example, this particular lots 8, 10, and 12, the D plan, its palette will be the stone, the stucco, and then the board and batten up at the top, and then either asphalt shingles or standing seam roof. In all probability, the reason we wanted to use asphalt shingles here or some form of composite shingles is the roof is so cut up that a standing seam roof becomes difficult for solar panels, because every single one of these houses are going to have PVs and solar thermal. So in all likelihood, what we're going to do is on the 2 stories, because they got multiple roof planes, use the composite shingle, and on the broader roofs, use the standing seam roofs.
I think I understand all, Bob, but I will urge you, before you go to council, present a matrix that makes clear what the palettes are.
That's excellent
Because
advice.
as I look at this, it says, these are the colors that are being approved for Plan A. And that's not necessarily what's being asked today. And I think you'll save yourself a lot of headache. Or on Plan B, it may have the oatmeal plaster rather than toffee. And so I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of headaches if that's not spelled out clearly, that these color schemes are not restricted to the lots that are identified currently. So that's my suggestion.
And actually, I think by doing that, may remove some headaches with buyers also. So I think it's excellent advice.
Okay. My last question for you at the moment, let's say that all but one of the houses has a composition roof, and just one person elects a metal roof. Persuade me that'll look good in the neighborhood.
You can't. It's going to stand out like a sore thumb.
So-
So what we're going to do...
How are you going to, because as presented, there's nothing to prevent that in the conditions of approval. The developer may sure say, no, we're not going to allow that, or we don't want it to occur. But so how do you suggest a resolution be crafted to prevent that occurrence, since I think we agree it's a bad idea?
I think we can put together a resolution that has a minimum balance. In other words, 60% of the roof should be one material and 40% the other. So that if a buyer comes forward, the first buyers that come in, if they want a choice, once the allotment of composite roof is hit, then all future buyers would have to have the other roof, the standing seam roof. So in other words, and you have to, I don't know if you agree with this is my suggestion, is that rather than all of them being dimensional shingle or all of them being composite, that we agree to some balance, some ratio.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So we're not deciding tonight, but I'm going to endorse having some minimum parameters, so we don't get 11 of one. And
I think it's an excellent, that's 2 things I didn't think about, so glad we came here tonight.
stop already. Really.
Well, also Sandra, in her report, recommended that condition of approval would be no more than 4 units, same material, color scheme.
Oh.
You could expand that into,
Not less than.
yeah.
Those are all my questions for you guys at this time. Anyone else? So shall we discuss it and try to craft some?
Well, one came up while you were talking about Plan D for me, which is how much.
From outer space.
Very good. That's where you
It
came
was
from.
Plan 9, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Sorry.
Brick is bothering me a bit. Is there any brick? I haven't seen any brick in the neighborhood anywhere near that.
When we brought the project through the first time, there was so much conversation on density and view corridors that the designs of the houses didn't get the type of attention to detail that this go-around did. So when we really started looking at the houses, we realized that the original plan had a potpourri of designs. And we wanted to stay within two genres, either arts and crafts or prairie. And in doing that, we looked at different roof materials, roof lines, banding, things that were consistent to arts and crafts and prairie. We saw that the brick was a consistent theme, so brick or stone. So it is consistent with the architectural style. It's not, there isn't anything else across the street that I know of that has brick, but it is consistent with the architectural style. So that's how we offset it. It just kind of works with the design.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Who'd care to begin? Bueller?
I'll go ahead and
Bueller?
start. I do have the brick concern. That's probably more of a personal preference. I don't think it goes against anything the town has been trying to do. Then one thing that we actually didn't ask about, but I more have a comment about, is I am concerned about the facade look, about only wrapping around part of the house. I have friends in Colorado that are in developments with the same thing, and I really, though it does wrap around the corners, and I appreciate that's trying to take into account some of that, I really feel like the design ordinance is trying to lead us away from this so that it's something that is consistent throughout, that it's wrapped entirely around the house. And I know that's a cost issue for the developers, and I apologize for that, but I would really strongly move away from what I perceive as facades on the houses. Generally, style-wise, I'm okay with the change to kind of the prairie style. I think that works well with the valley. I agree with the two recommendations of staff here about making some recommendation, a condition of approval about if they do have a basement, they can't turn that into a second residence and rent it out. And also the one about kind of design diversity. And I think I would agree that I wouldn't want one house to have the metal roof versus and all the others not, so that there should be both a minimum and a maximum kind of thing, like a range. That's pretty much my only comments.
Do please, Bob, but just come to the mic.
I just wanted to explain our logic about not continuing the stone around the corner, because there was a lot of discussion in our office. The way the fences run, it's unless you're literally standing at this close to the gate and looking over the gate, you can't see both surfaces. Because between the gate and the fence and the gate, there's a gate in the rear also. The only way you could possibly see a continuation of the stone is to be 10 feet tall or standing right at the gate looking down. If you're in the side yards, you can't see the stone around the corners. And if you're in the front, you can't see the stucco on the sides. So when we looked at where we're putting our materials, we decided, the standing seam metal roof, by the way, is much more expensive than the asphalt shingle. So we decided to put the money in the roof where you can see it and take it away from the sides where you can't. So, and interestingly enough, there's a house next door to Lot 13 that has the exact same thing. It's got the facade in the front and no stucco on the side. So anyway, that's our logic. I just wanted to kind of put it out there that we also had this discussion, and if you understand the reasoning behind it, maybe it's more palatable.
So can you then comment on E and F? Do they have fences and gates like that?
Yeah, we talked about that. We're actually going to, where you can see lots 1 and 2, we are going to bring it around. Because it just, from Staggs View Lane and Yountville Crossroads, we want it to look consistent. And that was actually something that Sandra's comments brought to our attention. So, yeah, you can put that in the notes.
Okay. Then yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Nice pickoff, Rob.
So with those comments, I do agree with that approach, as long as E and F are considered as wraparound, because they don't have those gates that block the views.
I'm glad, actually, you made the distinction and the clarification on the materials, because, I mean, I was looking at these, they're all consistent materials with what we're looking for. But it'll be interesting when you're in your marketing mode to talk to a buyer, for instance, about the wainscoting. You know, you're going to have, you could have brick, you could have Coronado stone, and I'm assuming, and hopefully this is what you'll do, is that because these are computer-generated drawings, that you can change those materials on that image for someone that's a potential buyer. Is that kind of the approach that you'll be taking?
Exactly.
Okay. Because it is confusing in terms of, you know, me looking at this and saying, well, maybe I'd like the brick on Plan F, but maybe the color, you know, the Viejo stone looks better on that, you know. And so going back and forth, if there isn't a tool that you can use in creating that for your buyer, potential buyer, and that, I'm assuming that's what you're going to be doing. Yeah, I don't have any further comments. I mean, I think it's consistent with what the town is looking for. I don't see anything that's glaring that stands out to me.
I don't have any comments, so that's fine to me.
I've just got one thought. First of all, I like the fact we're now putting tasting rooms into homes in Yountville. I think that's very good. I have no issue with that. But also,
We all have tasting rooms.
Of course.
It's called our kitchen.
yes. So I just thought it was interesting. I've been driving around and biking and stuff, and I've yet to find any consistency on Stagg's View. It appears to me that the only house number 17 is the only thing that comes close. And it is stated several times that it's more compatible with the neighborhood, but I think it's compatible with the design, but it just seems there's no consistency on that neighborhood block. I just don't see where it all blends in. I agree with everything you've said, and I'm fine with it. It comes back to that inconsistency about the wraparound. If it's inconsistent with the design ordinance guidelines, I know it's a cost concern, I know there's a fence, I know you have to be 10 feet tall, but it goes back to the other conversations we've had at other meetings about consistency throughout Yountville. So I think it looks great on paper. I just want to state that I see a lot of inconsistency in that block, and I think this is a standalone development. It doesn't necessarily blend in onto Stagg's View. So, but with that being said, I'm fine with it.
Come on up, we're just having a discussion, so it's okay, we need to be so formal.
I appreciate your comments, you know, Jeff. The challenge with our neighborhood is that basically Staggs View Lane subdivision was approved in like 1990, 1991. And I think the town went through a major zoning and design, well, actually created the zoning and design review ordinance. We didn't even have one before, you know, like in 93 or 94. So that project was approved under a typical subdivision design, and then after that, O'Brien came and did their 90 homes, and then Yountville Square. And so the challenge, I understand, is I think our finishes, the prairie design, is more compatible than the Victorian crafts, the Victorian looks we had in the approved plan 2 years ago. I don't think there's ever a perfect choice, but I think we're consistent with the overall neighborhood in that area, and we're just, you know, doing our best to get through this, and so the process, but I understand your concerns.
Thank you.
All right, I'll run through this as quickly as I can. In particular, I want to endorse the portion of the staff report that suggests a limit of 4 units sharing the same material color plan. I'll take the applicant up on the offer to propose to the council a minimum and maximum of any particular sort of range. I endorse the no consecutive buildings have the exact same metric. So the matrix, we talked about that. On the so-called wraparounds, I will agree that where a private rear or side yard is screened from view by a fence, I don't object to a different treatment. And I note again where it's obscured by a fence. I would strongly urge you to have available to the council the prior renderings. I feel like we're sort of working without a net here. It's proper to judge things on their own merits, and I think we're doing that here, but we're not really comparing it to what we're being asked to change, and I think that's a bit of a disadvantage, and the council should have those prior examples in front of them. I want to touch briefly on FAR, my last item. The changes to FAR I support, because I spoke very clearly the last time this was up, that I support an aggregate FAR view of subdivision projects within reason. One may be at 38, and the next may be at 32, for example, but on the whole, I think a reasonable aggregate application of FAR. The one spot I will disagree is the suggestion that a condition of approval note that a basement over 600 square feet can't become a second unit for two reasons. One, I think it's redundant. It can't be approved as a second unit by that size. Two, I think down the road it limits the ability of it to be lawfully converted to a second unit. In my view, the reason second units are limited at 600 feet in Yountville is to prevent kind of a backdoor duplex. Have two kind of large dwelling units. Since we don't count basements toward FAR, were a homeowner in the future to come before me and say, gosh, I'd like to convert my basement to a second unit, I would want to look at it with an open mind. And I think it's up to the developer to advise the buyer on the current state of the law, which prohibits it, not necessarily us. Other than that, we may as well just attach the entire zoning and design ordinance to this approval to let them know. So that's all I have to say. I think you're on your way. Thanks.
PowerPoint presentations from 2 years ago that show those elevations, so I'll get those to you if that'll help.
Okay, let's do that tomorrow because we're going to publication.
Could be. It could be. You might need to get permission to, squeeze some parking into another spot. But I don't want to preclude the second unit just because right now it's too large. If somebody comes in with an application, okay, well, you're too large, can you make that space smaller? Can you provide the parking? I don't think it's an advance approval of the second unit. I just don't think, in my view, we need to club them. My fear is down the road, it creates a situation where, well, they must have said this for a reason. No second units here. So we just can't have them in this neighborhood. And we're not saying that. We're saying the space is too big according to the current standards. And indeed, if I were a buyer, I would say, well, the basement's 640 square feet, for example. Can you make it, can we build it? Let's build it at 600 and then let me go see how I can try to get that approved.
So does the zoning allow for a duplex in that neighborhood?
Mixed residential? Yes.
Yes. Use
So it
permit?
does.
Use permit?
Yeah.
Use permit.
It'd be a
Well,
use permit.
there are multiple units on this, in the subdivision.
The
There's
one, the floor
Right,
plans.
on individual sites, which are standalones, would,
Well, this was a master development plan, so it gets taken as a whole, and had they come in with duplex units as part of their overall plan, that would have been.
so that would have been part of the consideration.
And possible, but part of the consideration.
So,
It's also worth noting that if these were second units, the only access is from the rear of the structure, through the
or
side
along the
yard, all the way
side,
up the back.
or through the side yards, I suppose you could do that. but
we have
then you're
that
walking
now
past
where-
the master bedroom.
There's nothing in the ordinance that requires the second unit to have an independent access to the public street, is there?
Oh, no, not the
No,
public
it
street.
has
but
to have
independent
private
access.
parking.
Private usable space and parking. And again, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
hey, we're approving second units. I'm saying we don't need to club that currently they're not allowed in this configuration. I want to encourage that somebody could try to pursue it. Although you raise a good point, maybe second units should have some sort of continuous pathway.
Well, I think that they should, because essentially you're talking about two independent units on one
And a lot
piece of
of
property.
privileges are granted to have a second unit.
Right.
To encourage rental stock housing, the town and local governments are essentially compelled to allow them. And when they get turned into really just de facto guest houses or bars, I'd like to have one, a little bar, but.
Well, essentially, the houses are so tight to their side yards that you're either going to be walking by the master bedroom, or you're going to be walking past the kitchen and another bedroom in the garage. Either way, it's not the best of.
Right now, it just states that there shall be a separate exterior entrance for a second residential unit. So you
It
don't,
doesn't say that it has to be gracious, it just has to be.
right,
Well, you can
So-
pass through any part of the property to get to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
You have to crawl through a back window, but
It basically boils down to whether a homeowner wants to provide that to
Exactly.
a tenant who's going to be in their backyard, and that's their main entry, and so it's probably not likely.
Yeah.
Although we did want to call it doesn't meet the standards, but
maybe-
perhaps
But we
that's
have
enough.
them. We have second units that can only be accessed by walking through a backyard. They may have a separate entrance to the dwelling unit itself, but it can only be, so that's something maybe we ought to look at when we revise the ordinance.
I'm
It's
glad you
good
brought
that
that up,
you
yeah,
brought
'cause
it
I
up.
was-
You brought it up.
Okay. We brought it
Good,
up.
thank you for.
Are these lots deep enough to accommodate a guest cottage if they wanted to apply for one? Are these lots deep enough that they could apply for a guest cottage?
well, the size of them are, yes, but they have no parking possibility. They need to provide another parking space for that, and they're relatively kind of narrow and long, and the size is okay, but it's they've got their front yard, and you know, what he was talking about on the units across the street were developed under a different zoning code. Their garages are forward, where that's not allowed now. These garages are back, but even with that, unless the decision makers are willing to entertain a tandem situation where the second unit would be parked in the driveway,
Right.
parking space for that, that would be the only way they could do it. And then they would have to somehow reduce the square footage to 600 on the basement and wall it off or only make that available to the second unit somehow.
So
Take
they
that
would
one
have to
step
comply
out
with
of the
the 600 square feet
Oh,
for
yeah.
the second
Yeah.
unit.
Now, nothing in our ordinance currently prohibits tandem parking from being counted. I think that's come up a couple of times. It's neither allowed nor disallowed explicitly, right?
We actually, about 2 years ago, passed a section that talked about the recognition or acknowledgement of tandem parking in certain situations when it's approved. And second units were one of them, duplexes were one of them, lots of a certain size, like 4,000 square foot lots that, you know, have a lot of possibilities there, were another one.
So that would be.
isn't there even a tandem parking on C, or did they get rid of that in the ultimate plan?
Had they, in
At one
initial
time, they were
proposal,
talking
said
about
that?
doing tandem parking, and they have really long parking
Oh, they are.
spots there.
That's what those designate.
Okay, that's what I thought. So they have them
Per unit.
on there, yeah.
So they already have tandem parking?
On
On the affordable housing
On the affordable
lot.
housing.
It's lot 2.
So that design for affordable housing hasn't changed, so it's still the same as they originally came in with? Never saw.
You know, the only, and I will note on that, the only thing that may change on that will be the landscaping a little bit, in the sense that there is a halfway, there's a manhole that exists right now between, I believe it's either there or there. It's there. And these lots are typically you connect to the sewer out in the street. So that's where your laterals run to. The sewer on this will run to the back, towards the back part. There's a sewer line, and the town has an existing easement, 10 feet along the rear that runs all the way down. So these sewers are going to connect to the back, and there's a manhole right there. The town needs access to that manhole,
Thanks, Rob.
for the truck, and annually does a flushing. And so we're going to come in, well, we're looking at two alternatives. One is getting permission from Beard, who owns this property out in the county, to come in once a year and have access to that. Or if they can't get that, they'll come in across the affordable lot and then come in across these 3 lots and be able to move the truck to where they can flush that. They're only building the fences to the easement. They're not building the fences all the way to the rear property line. So that's going to be clear. But what the only obstruction, if we're taking that route across the easement, would be some shrubbery that they have on the affordable lot that's located in the easement. And they would need to they can still have that, they just got to move it outside of the easement and have low grass. And we'd probably put some type of surface in there that you can will take a wheel load, either turf block, or they do have other things that you don't even know there's a structure under there. They're all
It's
rotor
called
rings.
grass pave.
Yeah, I'm aware of one called rotor rings. They're like rings, a ring matrix that's buried under turf or the soil, and they can take a fire truck.
Where's the bioswale going to go? Because if they build their fence along their side of the easement, some of these lots go right up against that.
Well, the bioswale is in that same 10-foot easement.
It's in the 10-foot easement.
Yeah. What's, the sewer line is
But the-
At the
very
east property
close.
line, so it's
So
within a
it's a
fence.
depression.
It's a grassy swale or
Yeah,
vegetated
right.
swale that runs along the back.
But that's, if you use grass pave, well, I guess it does drain.
And we only need it across 3 lots. And this is already paved up to about here, and then it starts getting their landscape.
So the first 3 beyond that, those the blue, white, and blue.
Yes. And that would be the only change otherwise, other than what we just discussed tonight.
Cool.
Previous.
Shall we?
Approved.
Oh, it is.
I'm sharing drawings that were approved just for your information
great.
tonight, even though you've already reviewed it. Just thought it might be interesting to refresh your memory or see it.
Thank
I
you.
didn't
I should have
include
asked for those earlier.
Oh, my God.
I like
I
that.
wanted it
agree
to
with
be a fresh review because they were so different, and
Very
I honestly think they sort of threw together drawings for their approval, and there wasn't a lot of consideration given to it, especially I think it's Plan B,
God.
so it is an improvement.
When
Yeah,
you
this is
look at
much
those
better.
chimneys that are like
Yeah,
attached
so much
practically.
better.
Vastly superior to
Yeah.
these things. Oh, my God.
And
my
This
the very odd chimney
cultured
treatment.
stone, it looks like Home Depot. And, that shopping center down there.
Not that there's anything
Slapped
wrong
on.
with that.
This is much better. Well, that would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, the council will laud them for coming back with this after that. I mean, if they would have built those things.
And Sandra, what about the neighbors at the first go-around? Any feedback or concerns from them?
They were more concerned with the development happening at all there. They liked their vineyard views, they liked how it was open, so that was just sort of a culture clash in
Right.
understanding that. And that's why they worked with the applicant, or the applicant was willing to do about half
Who's there?
one-story units to preserve as much as possible. But then I think once they understood what was happening, they were supportive or neutral of the project. What was that?
That was the biggest complaint. 2 stories and arguing over who
Yeah, and
would have them.
I think that they've got a nice mix of 1 and 2s. I think.
I know. They did more than they needed to, in my view.
The council is a public hearing on this, so they'll be noticed. And also, I believe they did some outreach prior to this meeting to the neighborhood. Haven't heard anything. I don't think we've heard from anyone, have we, on
Shall we move on to 8.3?
it? Sure. This is a kind of going to be a grab bag of stuff. I think I'm going to take this first or second, but I think I'll take it first. It plays into our discussion on some of the standards that we talked about in the Old Town Historic. And what it is that the council had a discussion about a number of zoning items, and one of them, including the RSC and then FAR and open space, and they took action at last meeting to change some of the ways that our FAR was calculated, or is calculated. Particularly in the commercial district, which doesn't have a whole lot to do with the Old Town Historic, but in other ways it does, it will matter here. And let me cover what they did. The old way of calculating FAR used to be from exterior wall, and now it will be from center line of wall or center line of bottom plate, whichever is less. And the idea there is that people have expressed a penalty when they are using decorative stone or cladding of stone on the outside, or a deeper wall cavity for insulation. They feel like they're being penalized because we're measuring to the outside and they're doing things that, taking measures to increase their energy efficiency or make the building look nicer. So it's a small thing and it won't matter a whole lot, but it will at least stem that criticism on measuring to the outside wall. So now we're measuring the center line of wall, our plate. The second one is,
Excuse me, but then you're going to have to know what the materials are to actually figure out what the center line is.
right,
So you're going to have to know the thickness of the veneer.
yep.
All the boards that are on top of that,
Mhm.
that size.
But we already need to a certain extent, know that, the treatment they're using, whether stucco or brick or, so. That should be easy enough. The other one is to, this applies just to commercial, won't really apply to Old Town. The idea of unenclosed porches, balconies, breezeways, logias, all of these features that are encouraged in the zoning, in the design ordinance on commercial buildings to make them more interesting and create recesses in the facade and articulate the facade. Were formerly given a 250 square foot exemption for commercial buildings. Now, that did not specify what that meant. Was it per face of building, per project, per building in a cluster? For each building got that in a cluster? Because there was another section in Old Town Commercial that said they wanted the buildings broken up into no buildings smaller than 2,500 square feet. They wanted these clusters of buildings rather than a big mega building. So in applying that 250 square foot exemption, first of all, we didn't know exactly what that meant. Was it by face of building or because some of these faces of buildings, they're pretty big and 250 square feet isn't all that much. And then that was one thing. The other thing was, on the one hand, they wanted encourage these architectural elements. And then on the other hand, they were really discouraging them in the sense that once you get beyond the exemption, which gets eaten up pretty fast, the applicant sees it as a penalty. And they're going to start not providing those after the minimum is reached or maximum is reached. They're going to start putting that square footage inside the building and stop using them. So we took to council the idea of just get rid of the 250 square foot number and just make those types of architectural features on commercial buildings exempt. And if their consideration would be looked at the time of design review in the sense of are they overused or not, but to not make that a number that would dissuade a designer from putting those features on a building. So that's what, we essentially got rid of the maximum number and just said architectural features of those types are exempt from FAR calculation. Typically, they're unenclosed, like balconies and that type of thing that you want to see on a building. The next one was outdoor storage.
Can I interrupt? Sorry about that, because one just popped to mind. So, for example, we take Summerston. And now I've got ink all over my hands. We take Summerston, and they have that balcony/patio area above the smaller building. And that was required because, I believe, of the previous way the ordinance spoke, to actually be considered public space to help with FAR?
Open space, they were counting that as open space.
So now they wouldn't have to, or did that?
Well, that was actually not counted in their case as FAR.
Because it was open space.
Yes.
But now they wouldn't even have to make it open to the public. They could just have it as private space, and it wouldn't be counted towards FAR.
The status doesn't change really, and we're going to go back to the council with some open space. The question there is, they're at, on these commercial projects, you get right on the razor's edge between a 25% limitation on FAR in the building, and then 25% obligation of open space, which, as defined in there, is almost typically impossible to attain. We really strain to come up with open space on these commercial projects, and we count every little remnant of landscaped area. And they furthermore have an accessible open space definition. It's really, really hard to come up with 25% clear, usable open space that's available to the public on these commercial projects. So we're looking at ways to reduce that number or redefine what usable means. But typically on Summerston, they're providing their 25% FAR, they're right up against that, and then 25% open space. And then if you start defining the use of the open space to where it moves it into an FAR, then they're over on FAR and then deficit on open space. So the use and how that's defined of those areas becomes all important, because they're right on the edge, and you squeeze one, it goes into the other, and then it puts them out of balance. So at any rate, we are trying to, in this case, at least encourage these other kinds of elements. Like, I think a better example of these would be the spa building at Bellagio that has some upper balconies that make the upper level interesting, and kind of give some stair-stepping articulation to that facade. Some of those were excused by the council as FAR in the approval of that project because it was a master plan development. And we want to, in the ordinance, encourage them. Have the designer come in thinking that those are okay to begin with, and get going along those lines from the start. So back to Summerston, the roof garden was counted as open space because it was accessible to the public at all times.
And so this change in the ordinance wouldn't actually have changed that, because it was a calculation of open space, not a calculation of FAR per se that forced that.
Yes.
Okay.
The next one was outdoor storage areas, trash and recycling areas. Those were counted as FAR or against their FAR, and they usually lowballed them. And then when the project was built, now they're putting trash cans where we don't want to see them, and because they want to conserve their precious, it is precious FAR. They want it in the building. And when you really think about what FAR means, floor area ratio, and it typically is what's in the building, it controls mass of a building, but we kind of started making it do other things, and any use area we defined as FAR. So what we did was basically say, they got to be screened, the trash area and exterior storage areas, but we're not going to count them as FAR. Plus, one new recent late-breaking change has been the recycling effort, which requires more storage cans, and then they have nowhere to put them now, and then everybody's in deficit already. So we're just saying, if you screen it and it's from public view and it's unenclosed otherwise, then we're not going to count it as FAR. We increased the commercial FAR exemptions and extended some of the ones that are allowed in single-family residential, such as interior staircases, but we did stipulate shall be counted on one floor only. Okay, right now, in the other, there's no specification, and we've been exempting the entire thing. We're
Which
going
is one of the
to,
things that encourages two-story dwellings, while at the same time we don't want them. Well, we discourage too many of them, so, yeah, cool.
well, and there's other breaks on that too, the 50% rule on a block and for 2 stories. But we're going to extend that same stipulation to the residential, that we will count it on one floor.
That seems reasonable.
We made clear that basement levels as defined in the California Building Code are exempt. It's right now and not expressly stated, but it is in residential. And,
Right.
yeah. And it ought to be in commercial as well.
That, Hotel Luca,
Yes, yeah.
They have a basement?
yes.
Yeah,
but
they have
that-
a
that-
spas down
The
there.
council had to make that determination that, how come it's only residential basements less than 4 feet
Right.
with their ceilings less than 4 feet above grade.
And then just the last one is landscape elements. That's actually pretty obvious, and we're not counting that already, but we're going to make that clear, that landscape elements. And we're talking about patios and decks less than 30 inches off grade are exempt. Pergolas and gazebos and those types of landscape features are going to be expressly exempt from FAR and commercial.
So, what comes to mind is, say, the new production or the new building in Washington Square. They come out, and instead of doing just an open air decomposed granite area, they want to do a huge deck there, and basically wall it off from the rest of the. That would be okay because we wouldn't count any of that space. And now so.
What would
I'm
be
just
the
curious.
difference, the wall?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deck with a railing around it.
It's a restricted area, is what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
And then it goes back to the open space thing versus,
Yeah, I guess, the feature, it's a difference between use and the feature itself, the physical built element. We're just looking at the built element. If it gets into a use thing to where it's excluded, the public can't go there, or that would be a use consideration that may put them into FAR.
so depending on the use, because I'm more than happy for somebody to have a little 10 by 20, a little thing out
Right.
front, but you take a restaurant, and there's a bunch of them in LA that I know of where they have basically, instead of a lawn, they have a huge deck that's, 1,000 square feet or something, or 2,000 square feet, and that's where they do all their service. So the deck would be okay, but serving out there is where we catch them as on the
Right.
use.
Now, any of these outdoor seating areas where service is part of a restaurant, we count as FAR, as though it were inside the building.
That came up at Gerard, whether it counted, and I think it ultimately became,
Yeah.
if you get your glass of wine inside, you're free to sit outside, even though it's
Yeah.
got tables, but it was table service that was the distinction, right?
Yes, we've been pivoting around the Bouchon example for a few years now, and that's why we're going to have this discussion on open space. Bouchon, when the bakery went in, became the sort of unwritten de facto standard for an outdoor area that's you could go there, sit down, read a newspaper, not buy anything, and they're not going to shoo you away. It's just there for the public. Or you can go in and buy something and sit down and eat it or drink it. But that became the gold standard for, against everything else was being measured against. But we need to get some formal recognition of what open space means when it's public and private, and that's what this other discussion is going to be about.
Because specifically for that one, we say the use changes at 7 o'clock at night, and it's no longer open space. Now it's considered
And then
Bouchon
they
restaurant
serve out
service
there,
space.
yes. Yeah.
And so the fact that open space isn't always open space is only sometimes open space, I think needs to be a key. I know we ran across it in Summerston as well, where they wanted to be able to shut the gate when they closed at 6 p.m. so they wouldn't have to have a security there. And I think we are really going to have to clarify some that, my opinion is open space 24/7.
Well, some of these became more complex than I ever envisioned, and where the council was, they were accepting of the taking on that for a period of the day, it means more FAR at that site at Bouchon when they serve. And yeah, I remember the whole thing about the gate, and they eventually dropped the gate from the design. They were going to, to refresh everyone's memory, where the two buildings are at Summerston, they were going to have a gate, there's that walkway between them, they're going to have a gate up front that closed the access into that courtyard and to the stairs that go up to the roof garden, and they got rid of that because of that. So one notion we're maybe advancing on the difficulty of coming up with the amount of open space that right now, 25% is a lot of a site. That's a lot. Is that outdoor seating areas that are now counted as use areas, and therefore they're counted as FAR, and I'm talking about Hurley's, outdoor dining, everybody, Bistro Gentil, Bottega, the rest of them, is that to a certain extent it is a visually open area. It's not closed off. It's not inside of a building, put it that way. That it would be credited, it'd be a percentage of that would be credited as open space, and the rest of it would be counted as FAR. So, and I think I included it in the notion of...
Is this a way to address what Rob's talking about, that if 8 hours a day it's not open space, you get to count 67% of it as open space?
Is that what you're
Kind
saying?
of an idea like that?
Yeah.
My current, and there's no magic to these numbers, but count outdoor use areas, i.e. outdoor restaurant seating, at perhaps 65% of the use area as FAR and 35% as open space.
No, so you're talking about taking Bouchon's outdoor patio and only counting 60% of that.
65% is FAR, and then they would get credit for 35%.
So that's slightly different than the time thing, I think, that you were talking about.
No, I'm saying the
but it
same
is
thing.
based on
If
time.
8 hours, a third of a day, it was used as,
But that doesn't, I don't think there's a time characteristic in this.
I agree with Rob. It sounds like which is confusing.
I had another one on here, exempt outdoor use areas that are used only on an intermittent basis. It gets too complicated when we're taking time of day and everything. If it's the majority of the time it is open space, then we're just going to say it's open space.
I see what you mean. It was
When
just
you-
a coincidence in that case that 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at how that works at Bouchon, the bakery is essentially closed, and all the people having croissants and coffee, they're not doing that anymore, and so there's sort of, frees that up
The
for,
definition of open space is you don't have to be having croissants and coffee to use that space.
So in this case, Bistro Gentil read Bottega, Bouchon's front patio, Cantonetta's patio on the inside do not apply because those are always used for food service while they are open, and you will be shooed away from there if you do not order. Is that correct?
Yeah, if they're exclusively for food service, they're now counted as FAR. We're suggesting that maybe only 65% of them be counted, and they get credit for 35% of that area as open space, because it is visually open component. It's not enclosed in the building.
Well, it's your example of the Bellagio balconies. I mean, they're visually open, so you're giving them the
Right.
FAR bonus for that, even though you can't climb up there
Yeah.
and use that space.
But I think even though the public doesn't climb up there and use it, I think it makes architecturally the building it opens more possibilities that they don't feel restricted from doing that because it's going to count against their enclosed
Yeah,
space.
and ultimately, it's about bulk. I mean, that's what FAR is about.
Yep.
And if you provide these openings and these holes in the building, then your bulk is cut down.
And that's kind of a great segue to the last one,
Yeah.
which is all of these up to now have been kind of gives of open space, or in the sense that we're maybe relaxing how we count open space.
I'm sorry, I want to interrupt just to go back a little bit about that. And thinking about it, I had to mull it over a second, which is, I agree that if it is truly remained open space, but then what that allows the person to do is potentially increase their internal space. So take, for example, you have the floor area ratio. If now we're only counting 60% of Bouchon's front-facing courtyard as FAR instead of the whole thing, that means now the building can be that much bigger.
Yes.
So it has a secondary effect, even though we might be saying, oh, well, it's great because we're just not counting this open space. That could then increase the bulk of the building. And so I want to make sure that we're careful about that
Yeah.
secondary piece to it. Is by doing this, we are essentially saying you can have a bigger building.
Well, yes and no, but they still have the obligation for the 35%. You're using 60, I've been using 65, but I'll give you 40. Okay, 40%. 40% is obligated towards open space, so it's not new, freed-up, buildable area all of a sudden. They still have to provide the open space component of that.
Well, I think Rob was on the right track. If 100% of this AirSAT's open space was FAR, and now only 60% of it is, there's expansion room for additional FAR, correct?
Well, not really, because a building is allowed a 25% FAR. So if you're using open areas to count toward that, it already means that you can't build your building as large as you would be entitled to if you maxed out the 25% FAR.
Assuming
Let's take an
giving
example. A
away some of it.
4,000 square foot lot. It's allowed 25% FAR, no exemptions, whatnot. Right? So it's 1,000 feet. And someone says, well, I'll do a 500 square foot building and 500 square feet of table service, both of which are going to count for FAR, correct? So there's
So by
the-
doing the table service, you're already getting a smaller building than you would ultimately be allowed.
But, bear with me, now we're going to say this 500 square feet of table service is not going to count as 500 square feet. I think this was what
Yeah.
Rob was driving at, and it was a good pickup. This 500 square feet is not going to count as 500 square feet of FAR. It's going to be 300 feet. Therefore, 300 feet, 500, 800, wait, make the building 700 feet. And actually, right?
And
So-
how are they going to satisfy their open space?
But
Which this balcony is contributing to, or this patio is contributing towards. It's not just the rest of it goes away, it is counted towards their open space.
No, because their open space is the other 25%. I mean, right? If it was, we said, have 4,000 to begin with, 1,000 of it was used FAR for the building, 1,000 of it's open space, the other amount's probably parking more than anything.
They still got to come up with 1,000.
So we're really only talking about within that piece is that we could, as we shrink the percentage of that deck that we're counting towards FAR, we're potentially increasing the building size within that 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Well, I will tell you that a lot of the restaurants already, the building themselves have been granted FAR exceptions. I'm trying to think of who hasn't.
How about just double counting?
Doing what?
Double counting. This conceptual 500 square foot outdoor seating area, it counts as FAR and it counts as open space. It needn't be one or the other
Well,
necessarily.
we could do that. I was trying not to get too wild with it.
Well, then why did you ever bring it up to us, Bob?
And you take the square root of the,
Yeah, I was just trying to come up with a way that, to count components of a site that are indeed open and are not enclosed and in the building, and that restaurant outdoor seating is typically that serves this kind of open component. You go to any one of them and it kind of adds to the openness of that site. And yeah, you probably, most of them can't sit down and read a newspaper, but it still visually is open.
So I guess maybe the fundamental disconnect is open space visual open space? Or is it?
Well,
Use area.
and I think we really need to have a discussion about what open space means. The way you read it now is the public walks all over it, and it's just open to the public, and I don't know if that's what it ought to be.
You could sell me on that.
and I actually liked what Jason said about I like the percentages, and this is a different percentage. Forget that other percentage we're talking about. Entirely different percentage of the day. Because I understand when Bouchon Bakery closes, potentially now there's parking differences and stuff, but what if somebody still wants to come out and enjoy the lights and sit there? They can't now, even though that was open space up until 7 p.m., and we've now given it to Bouchon. So I like the idea of, well, okay, maybe it's, then we consider it open space, and Bouchon use it, 4 hours or 3 hours, so you get it at I don't know my math, but that percentage of open space. It's open space the 21 hours, but
Right.
not those 3 hours that's being used by another
Granted,
business.
by time or hours it's available,
Yeah.
that's a complicated formula.
But I feel like it's kind of a creep that restaurants can do is now say, well, this was granted as open space, but now, say Washington Square, there's a bunch of different companies, but now these companies go away at night. So now I can use all that open space for my own work because now it's not used by balloon company, wine tasting room, whatever. Now the restaurant can use all that.
Well, I don't think there are that many, the restaurants that are all, I think, doing pretty much what they want to do as far as the hours there, except Bouchon had a capacity for a latent demand for more seating in the evening than they could accommodate on that little space up front.
But what if Bottega wants to start putting tables into the courtyard?
You mean where the event area is?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's part of their lease, frankly, one thing.
They could handle it
Say
with
the,
parking, though.
say the leaseholder says, yeah, that's fine. We'd love to increase capacity and make it a more active. We'll amend the lease, and yeah, you can do that.
I personally think it makes it more interesting to have more
To
people.
a
It's not
certain
a
extent,
building.
that's already allowed there as an event area. I mean, if they just haven't booked a wedding that night, or else there would be tables out there and people dining. They're allowed to do that.
As long as parking is accessible.
That was calculated in with the event area.
See, I mean, I appreciate all this, but one thing that I know in Europe, like in Rome, for instance, at lunchtime, suddenly the piazza's filled with tables and the restaurants spill out into that area, and so the piazza's much smaller than it was 2 hours earlier than that. And then that afternoon, then they all go away, and then the piazza returns. I think this kind of ebb and flow is fine. And open space is a hard issue because essentially I look at it, it's always tied back to FAR, and it's about bulk and about how that building is in relationship to the space that it's in. And so I always look at open space in terms of that. And so this discussion about the restaurants, I understand, but I guess I don't mind this ebb and flow of uses as long as they're compatible with what we would like to see.
Yep. And that'll lead me to my next one, too. But
I'm just leading you everywhere tonight.
But I'll think about that point hard and come up with maybe some way that would prevent a restaurant from surcharging their newly realized FAR that they're going to want to build something.
Yeah, because I want to make it clear that I agree with Rob that I'm fine with having space out there. I don't want us to do something that somebody goes, oh, that means I can add 200 square feet to my building, and then we're secondarily increasing the massing.
There's a very close relationship between FAR and parking demand, and all of them are maxed on their parking, if not more so, that they're in deficit. So I don't see a lot of them going, hey, I can add 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet now. No, you can't. You don't have the parking for it. Plain and simple.
What is that? Is it one spot per 250 square feet?
No, it's 1 per 400.
So average parking spot is 200 square feet? 10 by 20?
Yeah.
So it's...
And that's we have a very liberal standard, and it was intentional in that, and this is back before I got here, but it was, I think the construct was they wanted the inns and restaurants to work in a synergy to where people were walking from the hotels to the restaurants, and in consideration of that, there's a deficit or a problem with being overparked too. You don't want that. It's almost better to be a little underparked than overparked because you're making better use of parking squanders land, and you're making better use of your land supply for the hours, and talk about temporal consideration. It may be tight for a few hours of the day, but generally you don't want acres of parking that are unused. It's better to have it the other way and hope people walk from the hotels to the restaurants, and that's why usually you see 1 to 300 standard for restaurants, and then on top of that they have a requirement for employees. Well, we just have the 1 to 400, and that's it.
1 to 4 seats.
Excuse me, 1 to 4 seats. It's 1 to 4.
How many
1 to 3
seats will
seats.
fit in a parking spot?
4 people come in 1 car.
I thought that didn't sound right. 1 to 4.
But you were kind to not say anything.
1 to 4 seats, and it's usually 1 to 3, I guess it is.
Okay.
The last one had to do with the bulk of the building, and this one was a takeaway in that in portions of a building where there's a minimum of 100 square feet of open area within the building, and that part of the building is greater than 16 feet in height, clear floor to ceiling, we're going to count now as though there were an imaginary floor in there for FAR purposes. And it's a bulk thing of the building. Because it matters little whether there is a second floor. They could put one in there later. You wouldn't know it. But it's already, the bulk is there. The space is there. And Carmel, they probably have the most involved way of calculating mass. They calculate cubic square feet, or cubic feet within the volume of the building. And you get a number and you can use that however you want, but it all has to be within that volume. There's, at the other end, we're kind of in the middle where we have FAR. At the other end is coverage, where how much of the lot you cover with the footprint of the building, and then if you go 2 stories, then it goes to a different percentage. Well, we use FAR, the floor area, against the lot. So in order to control bulk of the building, if you're putting the bulk, I mean, an extreme example would be a building footprint that goes up to the maximum height limit, but is a one-story building. From the outside, you get all the bulk of a two-story building, but the floor area is only counted on the first level. So you could get more of a building and covering the site in total volume because we're only counting the first floor, but it went all the way up to the two-story limit.
And Summerston is an example of that.
Right.
The one tasting room area.
But the height limits are different for
Yeah,
single and
they are.
two-story, so
Typically, and that's why usually there's a second floor mezzanine or in these examples. I mean, that's a bad example, but look at Summerston. You go in, it's
It's a two-story that's open to
two-story
below.
building really, but we were counting that first floor. So you get the bulk of a two-story, but you go in the interior of that building, and a lot of it is a one-story configuration.
and had it been counted as a two-story, more open space.
Well,
I don't.
yeah, we would have less building or
Less building.
Smaller building.
just a different roof line maybe. So those are those changes. And getting back to a refresher on what we talked about, I won't keep you here too long, but last time we were talking about requiring, perhaps, these were all just ideas thrown out there, when the color of a residence is changed in Old Town, requiring approval. I'll tell you, we've thought about this a little bit, and staff would be opposed to that. We'll just tell you what we're opposed to. And the reason is that house paint jobs, first of all, you'd have to do one heck of an education job to the public to let them know that. Most people were lucky if they go in and start tweaking their kitchen and doing even plumbing and electrical stuff and come and think they get a permit, let alone they're going to hire a painter, and that painter's going to have that house painted in a day or two, and by the time we get to it, it's done, or mostly done. So
let me give you an example. It's legal to apply new colored, not the new color, but to apply asphalt shingles over existing asphalt shingles. Right? You can just go do that.
I think
You can.
the code allows it for so many layers.
Right. And so, but that would re-trigger design review, changing the roof color, so I fail to see the distinction.
The roof color?
Yeah. So there's no, I don't see there being a roofing permit requirement, to take your example, of, well, the painter can go and get it done in a day, the new shingles could be applied on top of the old ones.
Well,
Just
most
as well.
licensed contractors are aware,
Rat bastards, all of them.
they're aware that they need a permit. And re-roofs are over the counter. They're as simple as we can make them. You come in, we don't need plans, you just got to tell us what you're doing, and you get a permit. There's no plan check involved, because it's pretty standardized type of construction.
Presuming the color's the same.
We don't concern ourselves with colors.
You don't?
No.
You can go ahead and make it purple if you want.
So I can make my roof whatever
Absolutely.
color I,
Purple, I'd like that.
whatever color I please.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even though even
But
though
you'd have
that's,
to get a permit.
even though that's one of the things that gets looked at in design review.
Initially. And initially, we're there, we know they're going to paint it, and there's a discussion of that. And subsequent to that, you're right, and it may be nonsensical that we worry about it initially, and then they're on their own afterwards, but that's the way it works. And the other thing is this as well. It's really, by whose standard or what standard would we judge colors? If somebody came in and it was a little off beige for me or you, what's the right color?
Same standard we used tonight.
Yeah, you said
It's like what Potter Stewart said. I mean, I'll know it when I see it.
I don't want to make, I'm sorry, I don't want to make your job any more outside of what you're already doing, but I agree completely. Jason sat here, especially looking at these original plans as well. Jason sat here and made it clear, which he completely agreed with, that he has to make it clear to the council exactly what colors and what forms and what shapes and what stones they're going to choose. I understand what you're saying, but I'll be the finally perk up and say that I think we do. I don't want to be Orange County, but, I think when Eric brought in these additional pictures, it really hit home about the inconsistencies. When I drove down Staggs Lane, it really hit home about the inconsistencies. And maybe with all those changes you've been talking about for the last 20 minutes as well, which I think are all very good, maybe this really needs to be one of them to be considered. And it sounds like you've already made your decision, which is fine, but I still want to state that I don't think it's out of bounds to, it comes back to that inconsistency that was a commonality through the presentation here originally, and also coming back to what we were talking about is a garage meant for a garage, or can it be used as something else? I have to come to you and tell you what my roof asphalt tiles are, but then if I want to change them out, I don't have to anymore. To me, it's just all about consistency, and consistency is important in what I do in my business. And so therefore, I just think it's an important thing that should carry through in such a small community.
Yeah, and I'm just suggesting that from a practical standpoint, two things. One is, most of them won't be approvals before the fact. It'll be enforcement after the fact. And you can't unpaint a building, or I guess you can make them repaint it to something else. But that's going to be going to the mat, and I think it'll be vastly unpopular. And to what effect? We will catch the green ones and the weird paint jobs that happen once a decade. But most people, it's their house color is a personal decision, and they don't get too crazy, and they don't know to come in here and ask for permission to get their colors approved, and they're going to do it, and it happens fast. And we're going to be doing enforcement more than we're going to be reviewing these beforehand. So that's just from a practical standpoint.
I
No,
live
I
over
understand the practical
the
side.
vintage development, 100 units, 60 townhomes, and 40 single-family dwellings, and we have a paint code and a color palette, and you can only have a certain type of roof and all that. Fairly small number of people, you're just opening a horrendous can of worms if you go down this road, because even with that small number, people are just contrarian. They just don't want to do it. They just don't accept it. And we've had to take, people to task to repaint houses, at least repaint garage doors. Why can't I have an asphalt roof when there's 99 other shingle roofs in here? It would be mayhem, I think, just on our little example in our association.
And since you mentioned the other one, the garage, that would be another one that I think we would, and it's not that we get to decide this, staff, we would be making a recommendation. And how you make people park in their garage, it could be a case where someone has cleared out their garage, it's available for parking, they're not using it for storage, they like to exercise in there, or for whatever reason, they're not parking their car in there, and we can't have a bed check every night on who's parking their car, and all the cars are away. We got a small staff, and it's just, from a practical standpoint, the first time we enforce this, then we've got a prairie fire going all over town.
Good. They're all telling on each other. At least they'll watch out for each other. But doesn't that come back to the fact when I walk my dog off leash? I'm sorry. We'll all watch out for each other.
Vicious dog.
To the park every day, and I look directly into a garage that's not wide open, that has glass in the garage, and I see the workout equipment, I see the chandelier, I see the 72-inch TV in there, and it just, to me, it's also that, I understand what you're saying, but I think I understand what Bob's saying as well, but I think at some point, we go back to the businesses as well. It's a small community. I think I'm very fortunate to live here. I think for businesses and other people to come in here, it's a very fortunate situation, and these are the guidelines we have for living here. That's just my opinion. Maybe, maybe I'm just asking for too much big government, but so be it. I still think we're very fortunate to live here. And, it comes, might get in trouble for this, but it goes back to that house that that's in the picture that Eric Knight on Yount Mill Road, Yountville Crossroad, that it looks so nice on paper, and I've got to admit, I drove by there today, and it's like, really? This is what I agreed on.
That was one of our first deals.
And I will go on record as saying it's unfortunate I agreed upon that. So, and especially when we were told they were going to reuse the materials. I walked that property today. I found very hard to find reused materials in that landscaping like they said they were going to do. They could not, even if they tried, put a bigger lawn onto that property as well. It's just very unfortunate. So when I see things like that, that's where I get frustrated. But I do other things. I do have a business. I'm not just doing that.
I guess, and where I come from is I understand that becomes an enforcement thing, but I'd rather have something in the ordinances that we can enforce. Okay, maybe you're not out there beating the streets every day, looking in everybody's, but in case my neighbor goes and does pink polka dots, that there's something that can be done. That if somebody's converted built a brand new house and said, oh, no, it's a garage, to get the FAR appropriately, and then they go ahead and they throw their chandelier and big screen TV and pool table in there, that we're not just saying, yeah, that's fine. That they come before us, talking about transitions here, I think this transitions as well to the marketplace and their entry. People say they're going to do one thing and then oftentimes don't, and I think there seems to be getting more of it. And that's what my concern comes up, is there's more of it, and yet we have nothing in the ordinances that say we can do anything, and we have no history of doing anything, so people just continue to do it. They go, okay, we get approved, all right, and now we're going to do whatever we want to do. That being one of them, because actually that picture is the first time I saw it. I don't drive out that direction ever, and I was like, I couldn't even recognize it. And I'm like, wait, it got finished, and it looked like that, so.
But you guys have enforcement on things that you approve and they don't do what you've approved them to do, right? I know at Jessup Cellars, you went and told them that they had to use that dwelling unit for dwelling. The new owner's using it, but essentially they complied with what was originally approved because you complained against them. I'm assuming that's what
Right.
happened.
It's mostly use permit review and enforcement.
But
Notice things,
we are,
complaints.
what we pass on here is not binding.
It is when you rule for design
Oftentimes,
review.
it's not.
Residential.
Yeah, it's we're making recommendations, but
No,
it's not
you
binding.
are the decision maker on residential design review.
And it's binding and enforceable.
Where
You have a lot more
there is not
teeth
a
when
dispute.
you have a lot more teeth when there's a use permit involved. Staff does.
Yeah, there's
You have
conditions of the
your
use.
teeth are much sharper when there's a use permit, because that can be revoked. A home, use of a home,
Yeah, it's harder.
revoking it is,
This is the one you're talking about.
Yeah, so
I think it was Jeff, but I think so.
Jeff?
So what happens on a house like this where they, this is obviously not what got presented? What do we do? I don't see the reuse of the concrete in the wall that was planned. And this is without having the plan right in front of me. I can identify that. What do we do about that?
Well, unless it was a condition, a lot of people come up and say nice sounding stuff, but unless it's a condition,
If it's in the picture, don't we have proof that that was the presentation? Or do we have to make everything that's in the picture a condition? Should we have gone through here and said, okay, the fact that this is the floor plan is a condition, and the fact that there's a two-car garage is a condition, and the fact that there's a bathroom on the first floor is a...
what is it that they,
On the west side, this is just off the top of my head, I'd have to pull out plans. On the west side, there was going to be a wall around that tree that was made out of the concrete that they pulled up from the building.
That's true.
That was going to be elevated above the above the yard, and then there was going to be like decomposed granite or stuff in the front yard, because we expressed concern specifically, I remember, about how big the yard was going to be, and they said,
You did.
I did.
Specifically,
Yeah.
as well. No, which I agree with.
and so when it comes, and it shows up like this isn't the picture, this isn't what they said, and so, okay, we didn't condition that the yard had to be under 100 square feet, but if it's not in the drawing that way, I approve the drawing, I approve these plans.
Well, we can go back and have a look at the plan that was approved and see what they got, and point out those discrepancies to them, and
You have a
There are
CFO?
also certain elements of the plan that they can decide to do or not, like fencing around a project, they'll present what they're proposing, and if they build it, it has to match that, but that's an item that could be eliminated from a project along the way.
So, for example, we just approved the Vineyard Oaks, well, we didn't approve it, I guess that's different, we just gave comments.
yeah.
But, for example, if these plans were approved and they came back and didn't put that fence and gate that blocks the view of the
wraparound.
the wraparound, that would be okay? And they wouldn't have to go before any design review or anything like that if they just wanted to eliminate those fences?
No, because the approval would be based on the fact that it's not visible from the right-of-way. So if it isn't, it's not matching the project description
But
that becomes part of the
think,
project
yeah.
in the,
plus I think the
Yeah,
landscape
the
plan
condition.
included a fencing plan that was approved along with it.
So I think it's just kind of, this is an example of how do we go about, and any one doesn't need to be a huge issue, but how do we go about preventing this in a way that isn't Big Brother? Because I continue to run up against that. I don't want neighbors to be peeking over people's fences to see that they put in a pergola in their backyard or stuff like that. That's not my point. But how can we do this when I didn't have to peek over anybody's backyard to see that it's not the plan that was presented.
Well, we can have a look at the plan and go have a look at what they're doing.
What?
Do they have a CFO?
Not yet. I don't think so.
The wall's around the tree. It comes around between them and the neighbor.
So
the question is whether it's substantially
Yeah, it's probably not.
in compliance with
just-
the
let-
approval.
let me ask
Basic side.
this, I want to make sure I grasp this correctly. They do not have a CFO.
I don't think we've issued
I don't
one
know.
yet, no.
Therefore, they have not formally requested from planning staff approval of the project in its as-built condition. They haven't said, hey, Bob, we're done, please come sign us off.
No, the
So
windows
you-
are still.
That opportunity that the applicant's required to give you hasn't occurred yet.
Well, that's why I say, look, I'll go
Well, I
see
think
what
it's a
they
key
got
point
going and
because
go, what do you got in mind?
We're
I
not
mean,
talking
maybe
about a
they-
house that's done, that they're living in. The burden's still on them to call Bob or Sandra and say, hey, we're done, come out and look at our project. So a step hasn't been missed yet, it just hasn't occurred, right? Because it's their burden to say, we think we're done, please come check.
But then the question is,
And I
what,
think that's a key distinction. It's not, it's been signed off.
It's not having to go back so far, it's just stopping in somewhere
Well,
midstream.
it's on the applicant to call and say, we think we're done, please come sign off. And then that's the trigger for staff to say,
Right.
well, wait a second, the plan is a little different. I guess what I'm driving at, it hasn't been missed yet.
Gotcha.
but the
It
question
doesn't need
is,
to be looked at.
I think this is the first most people have seen this project
Yeah.
in this photo.
yeah, but the question is, what is it that you're approving? Essentially, everything that they presented to us? I mean, are there things that you're required by ordinance that you have to approve that has to be in compliance with what they presented here? DG, I mean, if they don't have DG, are you not going to apply it?
They have
Approve
a
it?
small DG pad. Yeah.
I mean, but maybe they said there was going to be 200 square feet or 300 square feet of DG.
I just think it comes back to the whole conversation of what we're putting down on paper and those changes that you're making and just how far we can take it, because let's face it, there are certain businesses in this town that are allowing people to walk out with a glass of wine and then following out closely behind them 5 minutes later and pouring them another glass of wine and charging them for it, when their use permit specifically states that that's not is not allowed. And so that's just my point about the whole consistency. And some of it bleeds over into the residential as well when I drove by there today. So that's just what it comes down to. And I know the enforcement and the looking over each other's fence is not what any of us wants. But I think people should be held accountable if they're coming to Yountville. I think I'm very fortunate to be here, and I'm very happy to be here. And especially when it comes to the businesses, if you want to be here, here are rules. You got to live by them. It's only fair.
A few months ago, Cindy Gates was in here proposing a sale of a property where some guy had sprung up some shack in the back, kind of a deal, and, and the town didn't do anything about it. Now it's in there. And so if you let people do it, they're just going to do it. And this is a minor example compared to putting up a shack in the back, but
Right. Where's this at?
it's off Mulberry.
No, it's on
Ivy, right.
Court.
They wanted to turn
But
it
they-
into. They wanted to turn it into.
But I mean, the process worked because they weren't allowed to do it.
Yeah, no,
It worked, but
right,
why didn't it
that's
work
the
the
point.
first
Yeah,
get-go?
well, because they snuck it in.
Exactly.
I mean,
but
no
somebody
one
should
knew
have gone
about
in
it.
and bulldozed it.
Well, I mean, nobody knew about it until they came in and wanted to
But
convert
if
it
you
into a
don't
second unit.
stay vigilant, that's what you get.
There was a change in process. That structure, there was a very old existing shed.
Garden shed or something.
And then it was improved when the county of Napa acted as the town's building department.
Right.
Right.
And that was
There's a building permit in the file.
And
For
that
Ivy
was,
Court, that little thing?
Yeah.
and so the town has since corrected that. The town now controls directly the building inspectors, and I think, Bob, your experience has had something to do with that. That it was hard, planning departments working on the project, but the county building inspectors, a different agency altogether. So there was a change in the process there. That one just happened to have started, 10 years ago.
Grandfathered way back in.
I remember
somehow,
Pat
but,
Alexander coming in here and making this passionate plea about the fact that they built it over a weekend and that when none of the inspectors were around or anything like that. And so it's not how you build a permitted
No.
structure. So I don't know
As a
what the
utility
story was.
structure, sure.
Over the weekend, just because you know that nobody's going to be around?
No, I mean, a utility structure, what was approved originally, the utility structure, the
But
garden shed?
not, but it, I mean, it's
Nothing-
larger than what's allowed. I mean,
remember
a
he
utility
didn't have
structure
permits
can
to
only
do
be
anything.
8 by 10.
No. No,
can't.
that's just what's exempt from FAR locally is 100 square feet is our
10 by
local
10.
FAR, and 120 is,
Well, anyway, I mean,
Anyway.
my sense of it was that they had ghosted this in on the weekend.
Exactly what happened.
Okay, getting back to their lists from last time, there's one other item here that I think we're going to have trouble with that was being advanced to restrict multifamily, and we apparently aren't getting many applications for multifamily in Old Town, but the idea was to keep it, the FAR at 25%, consistent with single family, rather than 40. That's going to run afoul of a lot of policies that are in our housing element that the tack there is to actually encourage multifamily as a form, because it's a form of affordable housing. And we last, 2 cycles ago in the housing element, actually made it easier on the lot size restriction to where you can do multifamily. You didn't have to have a minimum lot size that we were holding everyone else to, because it's impossible to do. It was restrictive of the development of multifamily. So they allowed larger lots for multifamily, and concomitant with that would be the increased FAR that you need for multifamily. So we would have to go in and,
why does a multifamily dwelling require more FAR?
because it needs to make more efficient use of the given site size.
Why?
So,
To me, I haven't made that leap. It's circular reasoning. To have a multifamily dwelling, you need more space, because when you have more space, you end up with a multifamily dwelling. Help me understand.
because we're
truly.
trying to put more, simply put, we're trying to locate more units on that piece of land.
But you're being
So
driven by
it's to encourage
state
them.
requirements.
Yes.
It's to encourage them,
Yeah.
not because you really need more space. I mean, somebody can say instead of a 2,000 square foot house, I'll have two 1,000 square foot units. Still multi-dwelling units, right?
We would have to go in to the housing element and,
Change the housing element and you got to send that.
yeah, and
State.
recalculate the potential for how many units we could conceivably produce, and the state's not going to like that. And
Okay, I get it, non-starter. But we can continue to happily deny them on a use permit process, just.
But apparently it's what's been happening, although we haven't had a
we don't
lot
have
of
to tell the
applications
state
along those
that-
lines.
We don't have to tell the state why they're being denied, because the use permit,
It is an entitlement, yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be approved through use permit.
And I guess since it is kind of a non-starter, if it comes back to FAR as we're talking massing, we're talking about increasing massing. I mean, just to get multifamily versus we could have multifamily with the same massing as
That's what
other
it means.
buildings.
Look at the apartments we have in Old Town.
Yeah.
They're more massive, they cover more of the lot, and that's just the way they are. They're not looking like houses, and
So-
were never intended to look like houses.
I'm saying I support the way we've been doing it.
So, anyway, there's that one. The other ones, I think we can do stuff with, like define what the front setback of a flag lot and second units, yards, screen parking, what that means.
you talked about stairwells.
Stairwells already
How
talked
about
about
frontage
that.
improvements and utility undergrounding and trench paving?
What's that?
Those are items we covered that I think are very related. Did we
Utility
talk
talk about
underground?
undergrounding in
Yeah,
Old Town?
I have repeatedly, that replacement dwellings are exempt from the utility underground ordinance,
Okay.
and I think that's an error.
So,
I shouldn't say, I think it's a mistake to have that be the case.
to underground to the pole rather than have overhead to the house? You would prefer to keep it Old Town, like overhead to the house?
No. Currently, replacement dwellings are not required to underground utilities. So, $1 million can be spent building a house, and the utilities are then strung over to the new roof. Guaranteed.
It's on, it's on Webster.
Replacement
It's on
dwellings
Starkey.
are exempt from the utility underground
Yeah,
requirement.
I'll have to look at that. There may be, in some cases, practical difficulties to going to the pole if it's not near where the
And-
house is. and-
Sure, and the case there is, I think, the town can say, well, fine, put a pole in
Yeah,
the
we
franchise
don't-
area,
Want that. I don't think we would want to do that.
okay? But to me, I'm not so convinced on the practical difficulties, because PG&E, for example, is only going to string an overhead service so far. They're not going to go 300 feet down the street with a
Right.
weatherhead. And so I think as we redevelop, there's one thing we want to do is get all our utilities underground, right? That's a matter of policy.
Well, now, that's
Isn't it?
one thing we need to look at in Old Town, that I don't know that there's necessarily a policy of undergrounding in Old Town. And
Then I think there should be.
whether there should be or not, there's a conscious decision to have no curb gutter sidewalk. It's all surface drainage. It's not a curb, there's no storm drains.
Not
Well, mostly.
And that's the other thing I touched on, frontage improvements. There's no uniform description of what frontage improvements are. One of our standard street details says put in a storm drain, a valley gutter, then the gravel shoulder.
Right.
Sometimes it's,
But we don't have a comprehensive storm drain system.
agreed.
We do not have curb gutter sidewalk.
No objection.
We actually got sued by a handicap activist that wanted $1,000 per corner in Old Town because we didn't have ramps. And ramps to what? There's no sidewalk to connect to, and that's how we prevailed on that. everybody has to walk kind of in the same condition out in the street.
Okay.
So that's in the design ordinance, that there will be no curb gutter sidewalk in Old Town. Now,
I agree, but there's no standard for how and when should frontages be approved.
right,
And that's what I'm originally intended to say, particularly in Old Town, where virtually every bit of remaining development is going to be replacement development. As currently construed, the design ordinance gives all kinds of exceptions to replacement dwellings. It doesn't say if you remodel 50% of the dwelling, well, then you need to improve the frontage up to the Old Town standard. Rob talked about where asphalt is very wide. In the scenario I'm putting...
there's little exceptions everywhere, don't know why that's wider there.
In
but-
in the example I'm putting forward, at a certain point, well, guess what? You now need to improve that frontage to the standard. There may be an island in front of a home that's now got the gravel frontage, asphalt on other side. Eventually, those improvements get done, just like the town's walking path. It gets done in sequence. Same with, again, I'm a real advocate for this, utility undergrounding. As properties get redeveloped, their utilities should go underground.
Well, that's what I'm questioning, whether there is any movement at all in Old Town or any CIP program to underground in Old Town. That by virtue of the same character desired by the no curb gutter sidewalk, gravel shoulder, that they are just going to leave the overhead as well.
Perhaps that's the case.
Now, we can take it another direction and say it ought not to be that way and ought to be
I
underground.
agree with that as well, but it beggars belief to me to think, why should we perpetuate overhead utilities when we can start to reduce
But
them?
you can't do them one at a time, don't you? It doesn't have to do a whole neighborhood all at one fell
No,
swoop.
here's the
The
example.
corner of Starkey and Washington did it
Here's
when they
the-
built their new,
Let me
and Yon
distinguish
did it
when
when
I
they
say new
built their
underground
home.
service. So all the distribution wires, the town's going to have to be the one to make that happen someday. And it's been happening slowly. The wires that go to the individual houses get put underground. So say, for example, the town does decide to go down Jefferson Street and put in all the distribution facilities underground. The person who has wires attached to his house says, "Get out of my yard. I'm not letting you convert me to underground service." Then you're going to have one pole just to serve these individual dwellings. So by my view, by not requiring the redevelopment to go underground with its service lines, we're making it tremendously difficult down the road to get all of that distribution hardware.
You know, I don't know that I really agree that we have not, in every case, not had them put underground to the pole if available. I'll check that for you.
Starkey.
Now, you can cite examples, I'm sure, that where it's
Starkey
not been
mid-block.
done, but I would,
The crack house that
Starkey
burned down,
and
that
Yon
they
Street.
rebuilt.
okay?
And I use that term endearingly.
Jefferson Street, about mid-block between, I shouldn't have said Starkey, I should have said Monroe.
What are we doing, Ginny?
It's Starkey.
Yes, and I'll freely admit I'm arguing against my own interest, but, you know, that's okay. And when I,
But I think of Ginny, the pole is across the street.
sure, do it all the time, we cross streets.
Right.
I mean, at least in my business.
Well, I'll check that. I don't think it's been across the board where we haven't. I think we have done some where,
Starkey and, and Yon, Jeff tried to point that out, where you can see where they're just coming, virtually every redevelopment project in Old Town in the past 2 years that I've watched, they're strong. I don't think crossing the street is burdensome at all. I think what can be burdensome is crossing the street and going 100 feet down the street to, say, replace a transformer.
so what is your position? What is your suggestion?
That replacement dwellings need to place their service utilities underground.
Stub it to, and if there's no pole, like put one in there, or what do you want to do with that?
In a case where it's completely unfeasible, and I can't really think of many cases where it's going to be unfeasible, because these overhead wires aren't going to be coming from far. Most are going to be coming from is across the street.
So have a drop from the nearest pole, or extend it from there, and if it's too far, put a pole?
Yes. and then underground on site
Trench it.
to the dwelling. So then, when it gets redone later, and it has been up and down, the project's very lovely homes. It seems to be applied when there's more than one home being built at once. Very lovely homes did it, I remember, because they bored across Washington Street, underneath it, I shouldn't have said across. Opposite Burgundy Commons.
Washington is getting treated differently because that corridor is getting undergrounded in the commercial corridor.
Yeah, this was residential.
Yeah, but that's probably, it didn't go down this far. Burgundy's kind of the end of it for where we'd be doing that underground. We're putting all that underground in front of Gordon's and,
This is opposite really Hopper Creek Bridge, adjacent to the creek.
well, I get what you want, and I'll check
And I can't
on
think of an argument against it.
what Graham thinks about that. I consult with him.
But just one clarification. So when somebody comes in and they're doing a redevelopment or replacement, does the Public Works also require them to restore the curb, the street level to what is the standard? Or we don't do that?
No,
In Old Town,
Yeah.
no.
the curb,
Well, no, I mean, for the instance where they've asphalted straight up to the property line, shouldn't there be a requirement to have them restore that to what the Old Town standards are for the street?
That's what I've been saying, Rob.
No, but I mean, you've been talking about undergrounding, but I'm talking about.
Frontage improvements.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And
That's why
I'm saying-
that's why I brought it up, because I wanted to clarify that.
so what you're saying, I think, is that the standard should be, and what's in the books as far as I know, is that they have a shoulder that is unimproved and is gravel of some,
Right.
and that's a whole nother question of what that ought to be to some standard, and I think it ought to be a limited palette, so they're not putting white rock. We get, crushed rock, we get DG, we get pea gravel, we get all kinds of stuff, and maybe some within a narrow band of some material. I think that's what's being
Establish
required
this.
rather than paving to the property line.
No, I'm just saying, and what Jason's point is, it's incremental. Let's do this incrementally to make sure, if it's out of compliance, bring it back to compliance when someone does a replacement.
Let me use
It's not being enforced.
Well, that's why I'm asking is
it's not.
Public Works doing that? No.
No.
It's not part of the building permit process and approval. It's not a condition, you don't get your certificate of occupancy once you've dealt with those issues, because it's not attached to the permit. So the street is what it is, and if it's out of compliance, then it's always going to be out of compliance, unless something's done to bring incrementally all of these places back to
So
what.
what you're saying is that as we go along here, and things are improved incrementally, are upgraded, redone, then you would want to, if there is not DG or whatever at the shoulder, take the AC out, put in the DG, and make it consistent.
Yeah. I mean, it's either the town of Yountville does it, or you have the property owners do it.
Well, for example,
I'm
using
suggesting, I'm sorry, Rob.
the building that I actually live in, on Adams Street, it's out of compliance. It's railroad ties up to concrete, or up to pavement. So if somebody were to take that building and completely remodel it however they want, I agree that I think they should then be required to meet the standard and put in that shoulder, which isn't there right now.
Okay?
Just like a water service.
And I agree with the undergrounding, too.
And are you perceiving it's happening a bunch, that things are getting built where they're not putting in DG, or whatever?
Yes, I'm
Well,
perceiving it a bunch.
I think what Jason's saying is that it's not tied to the building permit.
And
That this is not a requirement that be brought up to conformance.
Well, typically, and this is just rule of thumb, that my perception is many of these places are not volunteering to go out and conform to edge of pavement and then pave to their property line. I don't think that's happening, that I'm aware of.
I can look around and say, okay, asphalt existed there, replacement dwelling, the frontage wasn't brought up to standard.
Open ditch over here, standard requires actually a storm drain, not a solid storm drain, so that then it can be covered with gravel, so that there's not an open ditch, there's that still continuous. Yeah, it is pretty common, so and I know I'm a broken record, what I'm suggesting is, for example, a metric of 50%. Yountville had that as a metric for fire sprinklers. Sorry, Sandra,
Yeah.
Yountville had that for many years as fire sprinklers. If you touch 50% of the dwelling, you have to make everything right. And so, I'll just keep repeating myself. It seems to me that it should go without question that if a property is being redeveloped, I'm not talking about a small addition, redoing, but a property is completely being redone, why shouldn't that property improve its frontage to current standard, whether it's drainage, paving surface, or utilities?
I will have a discussion with our Public Works. And
What do you think?
I agree, but I also happen to believe, I agree with a big asterisk in the sense that consistency is great, but I think it's also somewhat antithetical to Old Town, where it's Old Town developed in this inconsistent way, and it has many inconsistency, and I think some people, in a very or subconscious way, that's the appeal to them of that. It's just this way of developed here and there, and it's not DG down each side that's golden, and then, or certainly, I think that's why they don't want the typical suburban subdivision curb gutter sidewalk. It's all gleaming white, and then, street lights here and there, everything's underground. That's exactly what they're trying to avoid in Old Town.
Right.
But, if that was the case, then in the design guidelines, they should never put it in there. I mean, there shouldn't have been any guidelines. People should have been able to just put up whatever they wanted to along the
Asphalt
street
with
front.
railroad ties. to
Yeah,
the-
whatever. I mean, and that's the way it used to be. That was the whole reason to come up with the design guidelines.
Well, to the extent they have them, they're not a lot. It's like put gravel out on your shoulder. I don't think that's too.
Well, they don't even know the standard. Well, I'm going to throw a couple feet of gravel, and then I think I meet the standard. But that's not necessarily what the standard
But
says.
you got to admit it's less restrictive than a standard detail out of our engineering handbook of what a curb gutter sidewalk looks like,
Oh, yeah.
conform to pavement.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to draw a 10-foot of gravel,
And whether it's all three-quarter clean crushed, or whether it's all DG, or whether, as you suggested, here's 4 different choices, so there is a hopscotch
Yeah,
pattern
yeah.
of shoulders, which I actually like that. I like looking around town and one person's got a different DG and the next person's got, I like that character, they match the house. But more than that, I like the consistent theme of gravel shoulder.
One small thing, I'll give up my enforcement for underground utilities. But I also think he just touched on a good point too. Is the theme of Old Town? I think there can still be a theme of Old Town without making it exactly what you just said too. I think we can have a theme without being overly produced and have it Disney-esque.
So I guess lastly, if there's any additions to this, I think you heard a couple of our positions as staff on a couple of these, and the whole thing can go forward to be discussed by council. On these other ones, we can bring back some of these definitions of what screen parking means and what a flag lot front yard is, and but if you have any others, then feel free to let us know or email us.
Well, thanks for listening to all of it.
Yeah. We appreciate you addressing these things. I mean, it's not easy. It's clearly not easy to bring clarity to a lot of this stuff.
Particularly
the
a
one-
district that is maybe a little out of focus, and meant to be somewhat.
Have we worn one another out?
No, I want to hear about the new entranceway to V Marketplace.
What'd you do?
The entranceway to View Marketplace.
So just today, they submitted preliminary plans. They've been working with the landscape architect, going back and forth on the location of it and the extent of the design. And it looks like they'll be before you in July to present it. And the final location they selected is north of the elevator shaft, rather than squeezing through the spot near the elevator and the cooler. So,
I'm going to give forewarning that I will bring up the fact that they're about 5 months late of their condition. So.
All done?
Well done.
All done.
Thank you all for your patience
Is that a
while I
vote?
got on my soapbox.
Well done.
I think we all agree to adjourn, yep.